welcome to Chapter 3 of Our Mother's Sore Expectations. Thank you for tuning in to my channel. My name is Olushola Live, and I'm so glad that you're joining me right now. This book is written by an amazing author. Her name is Kehinde Adeola Ayeni. She is my cousin, and she's done an amazing job, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy this. You can check on the first two chapters. Today we're going to read chapter 3, but chapter 3 will be in two parts. So today is going to be chapter 3A. Okay? Here we go. Page 45. Adewale returned home at the age of 25 years, and the country just became a brand new independent nation. He started to work for the government of the Western region, employed in the State Department as a civil servant in charge of the internal affairs of the state. The nation enjoyed some peace with all the excitement of self-rule, but by 1965 there were signs of trouble. Adewale was insightful enough to understand the implications of the situation for the country. There was tension between the different ethnic groups that the British forcefully put together. At the time, the country could have been at least 30 different nations. He anticipated wars as the different ethnic groups would fight for supremacy. He concluded that the army would be the ones to quell the rebellions that would surely arise. The army at the time consisted mostly of people from the north. These were people who had been encouraged by the British to join the military force, when the Yoruba and other southern ethnic groups were busy educating their children the Western way. Adewale, aware of all these and knowing that since independence, while different groups were asking for separateness and autonomy, the Hausa/Fulani wanted to extend their control to include the whole country. This was what they had tried to do in the 18th century, and they had succeeded as far south as Ilorin with the Holy Jihad, when the deep forests of the south became an insurmountable hindrance to them. The British completed the rest of the work for them by making the nation one. All they had to do was continue from where the British left off. He decided that he needed to do two things: join the army and learn the language of these Hausa people. A lot of them were in top positions in the army, and even though they could speak English, they would not unless they absolutely had to. The Hausa/Fulani, like the rest of the nation, had opposed colonial rule in the late 19th century. They had felt that it was their religious duty to fight the British, and unlike the Southerners, they did not embrace Western education. They held on to the Quran schools for their sons, and they held on to their language. Adewale hired a tutor from Sabo in Ibadan to teach him the Hausa language. He joined the army, was given rank of lieutenant, and put in charge of policy making because of his college degrees. This was not what he wanted. Even though the intellectual army of the military was well respected because most of the officers in the non-intellectual section did not have college degrees, they were not considered real soldiers. He realized that he needed training as a combatant. He knew that along with his education, the training would really put him in the forefront of the military. He applied to the army for a scholarship to go abroad to be trained as a combatant. He approached a few Yoruba generals for their support, telling them the reasons why Yorubas as a group needed higher representation in the military, not just in the intellectual section, but in the combatant section as well. He anticipated a future in which the military would rule the country for many years to come because of the brewing resentments and inter- and intra-ethnic hostilities, which colonization by the British had only temporarily interrupted. People would resume what they were doing in the past, with the larger complication that they were now forced to be in one country. It would give the Hausa-dominated military undue advantage. Dictators would arise and rule the country, whether the citizens liked it or not. The several inter-ethnic hostilities were issues that would take time for the country to work out, and the military was going to be in charge until this was done. It would be to the Yoruba's advantage if they were well represented in the combatant section. The generals listened to him because he was a very persuasive man. They had heard his story, they knew he was brilliant, and that the British examining board failed him twice because he was from Africa and that he was educated at Oxford. Adewale always made sure that anyone he came in contact with knew these about him. And since he joined the army, his leadership ability had shown through, as well as his charisma. He always ensured that he was in the right circle and on the good side of people who were important to his progress. He was sent to the USA for combatant training, and he returned in 1967 at a time when the nation just declared war on the eastern region that was determined to secede. He assessed the situation and felt that the Republic should be allowed to go. He was of the opinion that the diversely different groups which made up the country had no business being together in the first place. He did not like the attitude of the Northerners who wanted to have central control of the country, and he knew that central control always weakens a country or even a group of people as it encourages mediocrity and prejudice. As a person who had always enjoyed a good competition, he felt that the Northerners would only drag the whole country downwards because they had not embraced the Western education, and backwards as well. They had not moved with the times and were content to sit back and do nothing, while at the same time they had a sense of entitlement, believing that Allah chose them to rule. He had trained with many of them in the army, and he detested their attitudes. But it was obvious to him that the Republic that wanted to secede would lose the war. It just did not have the means to take on the stronger army of the otherwise unified country, so he joined the fight against the Republic. He was a major in the army on returning from the USA. He was put in command of a cantonment stationed in Ore. This was a strategic post on the border between the eastern region at war with the rest of the country and the western region. The task of his cantonment was to monitor the flow of people and of goods between these two regions, mainly for the welfare of the citizens. On the Republic side was Major Anunku, a 34-year-old Igbo man whom Adewale knew very well. They had both been at the University of London together. They had become reacquainted when they had both returned home from England and joined the army at the same time, meeting at the 6-month training. They spent a lot of time together at the training, catching up on what had been going on in their respective lives. Anunka had become a proud father of 3 children, and he talked endlessly about his English wife, whom he continued to adore as he had done when they were in England. When they arrived at their posts on either side of Ore, each man knew that his friend was on the other side of the dividing line, though they did not communicate with each other for the first 10 months of the war. Adewale, on his part, allowed the supplies of food and medication to go through to the eastern region and allowed several Easterners trying to escape starvation and the federal forces pass through to his side. Anunka was aware of all these. He acknowledged to himself that his friend was, in a way, looking out for him. However, 13 months into the war, when the federal forces were not making as much advances and progress in subduing the Republic's forces, Adewale, on the orders of his superior officers, stopped allowing the supplies, most of which were coming from the Red Cross and other international organizations, to go through. He also stopped allowing civilians fleeing the war from crossing. Anunku, against his better judgment and thinking that he could tap into their friendship, asked to meet with Adewale. The meeting was arranged when the 2 men, about a mile apart on either side of the front, sent some of their junior officers to one another. They met on a Sunday morning, and Anunku appealed to Adewale to allow the supplies of food and medications to continue to come through. He stressed that they were for the civilians, and he did not think that the civilians should be involved in the war. Adewale did not think the civilians should be involved in the war as well, but he believed that if the Republic's leaders saw that their determination to secede was killing their own people, they would surrender and the war would come to an end. Nevertheless, he conceded and told Anunku that he would allow food to go through, not medication, nor would he allow people fleeing the war. Anunku thanked him for his consideration, and each man went to his opposite way. 4 days later, Adewale received an order from Lagos to attack Anunku's cantonment And the reason for his order was that the Republic soldiers were being assembled there from where they would march into the western region. Adewale knew that this was not true. The federal forces had been pursuing the Republic's army, and they had done so as far south as Calabar, away from the western region. He also knew that attacking Anunku and his men was against the law, even if they were at war. It would be murder, as his and Anunku's cantonments were there per agreement on both sides for the welfare of the civilians. He realized that the federal government was desperate to put an end to the war and was determined to do whatever they could do to do so. He agonized over this for a whole day. Finally, he sent some of his men as spies to the other side to see what was going on, and if indeed the Republic soldiers were being assembled there. His spies returned 4 hours later and told him that there was nothing unusual going on, not any more than what they had seen on their previous trips to spy on the other side. Adewale sat on his orders for another 24 hours and continued to allow food to pass through. The following morning, at about 8 o'clock, his commanding officer arrived unexpectedly and demanded to know why the orders were not carried out. Adewale, standing at attention, explained to the Brigadier General that he was concerned about the welfare of the civilians. Major, at 23 hours today, you will wipe out every living thing on the other side of the front. I am sure the orders are clear, the Brigadier instructed him. Yes, sir, Adewale replied. He saluted the older man who got into his truck and departed. An hour after the Brigadier left, Anunku sent a frantic message across to Adewale to meet him, and they met in their secret meeting place 2 hours later. Anunku, who through his own spy system had heard of the impending order to wipe out him and his men, appealed to Adewale not to carry out the order. He explained that there were no soldiers being assembled, that the Republic's army did not even have enough men to resist the federal forces at the active front, not to speak of sending men to him. He stressed the welfare of the civilian population made of people who ran to the border town for their safety and to have access to the food and the other needed supplies. He reminded Adewale of the Geneva Convention agreement that has to do with the treatment of civilians during a war. He explained to Adewale that his superior officers knew this and that his orders were not to kill the non-existent soldiers but to wipe out the civilians. Adewale assured his friend that he would see what he could do, and they parted. At 23 hours that night, Adewale with his men, reinforced with more federal soldiers, stormed to the other side of Ore and wiped out every living thing they could see. Anunku was killed in the operation. Adewale's commanding officer returned the following day, nodded his approval at him, pinned the star of colonel on his sleeves, skipping the rank of lieutenant colonel. Thus he became a full colonel at the age of 33 years old. He was given another command that was closer to the battlefront, and he fought on behalf of the country, giving the federal forces all he could until the end of the war. With the war over, Adewale's future was bright. He was a most eligible bachelor, and every woman he came in contact with wanted to marry him. He continued to get more handsome with years. His sporting abilities continued to increase, and with his charm, he moved in the right circles. He was determined to become the president of the country. He felt that he had the right education and training for the job, better than the man who had the position as a result of nepotism. He also realized that he needed a good wife by his side, someone as ambitious as he was, from the right family and with the right education, to grace the office of the wife of the president. He started looking around for the right girl. He asked his friends and colleagues, all of whom were in one powerful position or the other in the country, to introduce him to eligible young women. He paid close attention to the task of selecting a wife, as he had done with other things in his life. He asked his friends, as a colonel, he was paid a very good salary, but he also knew that he would need to be independently wealthy to realize his dreams. He had not inherited a penny from his father, who had died prematurely at the age of 52 while he was away in the USA, and he had had to support both his mother and his elderly paternal grandmother. A lot of the army officers in the post-Civil War country were becoming millionaires overnight. Petroleum had been discovered and drilling had started. Contracts were issued indiscriminately. The economy was booming. The country had become one of the wealthiest countries in the world and was being courted by the rest of the world as the giant of Africa. Adewale did not want to have to become wealthy through corruption. He felt that it was demeaning, and he remembered his father, who had collected bribes from the citizens of Ibueleri while he worked as a tax collector, health inspector, police, and finally a judge over them. The memories of his father collecting bribes, which he witnessed many times, was very embarrassing to him. He felt that it was descending very low on some human ladder. He planned to become wealthy by the sweat of his brow, as he had all of his other achievements. He speculated as to what would happen if there were to be a probe. It would be too humiliating for him to go before a panel to explain the sources of his wealth. He decided to work for power and to have people answerable to him. A powerful man has everything without the need to dirty his hands with stealing or bribery, was his belief. Adewale met Moji, a 21-year-old woman who at the time in 1971 was rounding up her degree in law at the University of Ife. Her father was a Supreme Court judge, and she came from the prominent Adebola family in Lagos. She was the fourth of 5 girls. She was educated in England, but she returned home to attend college because her father wanted to be sure she would marry a Yoruba man. Moji was 5 feet 8 inches tall, very slim in stature, milky chocolate complexioned, with thick black hair that grew down to her shoulders. Her best feature was her oval-shaped face, with the eyes, nose, and mouth in equal proportion. She had an angelic, gentle look about her all the time. She always gave the impression to anyone who came in contact with her that her world was warm, comforting, and serene, and all you wanted to do was enter it with her and live there. She had a silky, soft, and gentle voice that made you feel as if she was caressing you when she spoke. Moji, having grown up with 4 other sisters, all of whom were equally beautiful, believed that she was meant for great things in life. She made it her ambition to marry well. She was a very fashionable girl and was always well dressed in whatever was the fashion of the day. Many young men in her classes in college tried to date her, but she would not go out with any of them, referring to them as penniless undergraduates. She dated older men, usually going for presidents of companies, most of them with a wife or 2 at home. With these men, the relationship was based on what they could give her, which usually were money and trips abroad to England, Italy, France, or the USA to shop for things that she needed to continue to look glamorous. Each day, Moji dressed like a model, ready for a photo shoot with no hair out of place. And no matter what the excitement going on, she was never ruffled. She looked calm, cool, and collected all the time, like the world was hers and all she need do was breeze through life. Adewale agreed that she was the kind of woman he needed by his side while he achieved his goals. He started to court her, and she was only too happy to be seen in his company. As a colonel in the army, he was the youngest man to have that rank in the country at the time, and he had become a very popular socialite who was invited to all the right parties in Lagos and Ibadan. Everybody wanted to be his friend. A lot of musicians like King Sunny Ade sang many songs of praise about Adewale, who was always at the parties where the musicians were asked to perform. He was the most beautiful man in the country. He and all of his activities were always in the papers and the social diaries of the citizens who mattered. Moji, who always accompanied him, became the envy of all, men and women alike. Adewale at the time was working in Ibadan at the 2nd Mechanized Division of the Army. He was in charge of strategy and implementation of policies, working closely with the civil services of the southwestern quarter of the country. He was like a bridge between the army and the civilians. He and Moji met General Rahim after a year which they had started their relationship in 1972. Moji by this time had finished her undergraduate degree and was in law school in Lagos. General Rahim was the Federal Commissioner for Infrastructure Development for the whole country. He was a 51-year-old man and had been in the army since he was 17 years old and had risen through the ranks. He had been raised in the deserts, being from a nomadic clan that tended camels, but he claimed a village outside of Zuru to be his village of origin. He did not have much Western education. He attended the nomadic Koran school that moved with his clan as they searched for food and water for them and their livestock from the age of 5 years old till he was 14 years old when he dropped out. He joined his father, taking care of camels, but decided at the age of 16 that the nomadic life of moving from place to place with camels was not for him, so he joined the army as a private. He worked as a batman under many generals, gradually earning promotions based on merit for his dedication and faithful services to the various officers he served. When he became a sergeant, he went to school for combatant training. He continued to earn more promotions and became a second lieutenant at the age of 30. He married his first wife in 1946. She was from one of the families of the nomadic clan and had been betrothed to him when she was born in 1929. Her name was Amina, but with the birth of her first child, she became known as Iya, and this name stuck with her for the rest of her life. In 1951, he was sent to England to train in the military academy, and on his return was promoted to the rank of major. In 1954, he became a lieutenant colonel, and in that year, the Sultan of Sokoto sent for him. Rahim, honored by this invitation, met with the king and the spiritual leader of his people. They discussed a lot of things that had to do with the running of the country. At the end of the meeting, the Sultan offered him the hand of his 18-year-old niece in marriage. Rahim could not refuse the offer. He considered it a great honor and that he would be in the Sultan's good grace. And the Sultan, on the other hand, knew he would remain answerable to him. His third wife followed in 1960. She was given to him by the Emir of Kano as a prize for making the Northerners proud because he had emerged at the time as the second most powerful man in the army. She had been 19 years old at the time. His career continued to make good progress. He was from the Fulani ethnic group, and as a result of this, his promotion came on time. He held many important political and military posts in the army of the country that was not at war. At the time of the Civil War, in which the eastern region of the country attempted to secede and the rest of the country stopped them, he was a colonel. He, like the other officers from the northern region, fought them on behalf of the country. Post-Civil War, the army was in charge of the country. His promotions became very rapid, one on the heels of another, and by the year of 1972, he was a lieutenant general and a power broker. He was a slightly obese man, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and with the fine features of the Fulani to the north of Africa. He had a brown milky complexion, and with baldness having set in, his hairline started at the middle of his head. He had an easy smile and very warm eyes, which had an effect of concealing his ruthlessness. He was a man easily given to emotions. He had been known to tear up in certain situations when he became deeply moved. He was also a generous man who lavished gifts on the ones he loved. But as a professional army officer, he would not make any compromise. He had been a brilliant commander during the war and post-Civil War, with the army running the country. He had continued to be the same way, allowing nothing to stand in the way of getting whatever it was that he wanted. He had become very wealthy. Adewale and Moji attended a party at the presidential palace in honor of the president's birthday when General Rahim saw the beautiful young woman on the arm of the equally handsome Adewale. He knew a lot about Adewale, as all Hausa and Fulani senior officers did. They knew him as a man to watch. They recognized his intelligence and his competence as an officer, as well as his ambitions, which were not welcomed by them because he was a Yoruba man. A lot of them had developed grudging respect for him, for he was a worthy opponent on all playing fields. The only regret they had was that he was not one of them from their ethnic group. Rahim approached the beautiful couple and introduced himself to them. Adewale knew of him, although he had never met him formally or been introduced before. He introduced Moji to Rahim as his fiancée. Adewale had not proposed to her at this time, and Moji, on hearing herself being introduced as Adewale's fiancée, beamed from ear to ear, which only emphasized her loveliness. Rahim complimented her on her good looks. He chatted with them for a while, and before he departed, he invited Adewale to his office the following Monday, telling him that he had a proposition for him. Adewale promised to be there. When they left the party, Moji asked Adewale why he introduced her as his fiancée. She wanted to know if it meant that he would marry her soon. Adewale told her that they would get married soon, and that the following weekend, when he came back from Ibadan to visit her, they would discuss it in details. Moji, very happy, moved into his arms, hugged and kissed him on the lips. The following Monday, Adewale presented himself in Rahim's office as he was asked to. Rahim kept him waiting for about 2 hours, and when he finally called him in, he did not waste time beating around the bush. He got to the point right away. He told the younger man that he wanted to marry Moji, that if he made it possible, his future was assured in the army. He would make sure that before the end of the year, he was promoted to the rank of brigadier general, and he would be given $500 million contract to build an expressway to open up a region in the northern part of the country, and more contracts would follow. Adewale realized what this meant for him, that he would have a godfather in the army with a secured future, as Rahim said. He did not think about it for a long time. He immediately told Rahim that he agreed to all the terms and asked the older man to give him a month to work on Moji into accepting the marriage proposal. Adewale did not think it would be difficult to get Moji to agree to marry the wealthier man. He knew that her weakness was that she loved money and all it could buy. She would also be attracted to the fact that Rahim was a general in the army while he was a mere colonel. The fact that Rahim also had 3 wives would not be a problem. Moji, being a Yoruba woman and a well-educated one, would be the general's official wife, the one to be presented to the world. He assured himself of all these. He thought of her father, a judge, who was a very proud man and might not be enthusiastic about his daughter marrying a Fulani man. But every man has his price, he said to himself. It was only a question of offering him the right amount of money and promises of a secured future. He did not return to his office in Ibadan that Monday afternoon after the meeting with Rahim. Instead, he went in search of Moji, who was very pleased to see him. He told her of Rahim's proposition, stressing the benefit it had for her. She would be the official wife of the general, who might become the president of the country soon, in which case she would become the first lady. She would have all that money could buy, go abroad to England and to the USA as often as she liked to shop. She would be in the same circle as the current first lady of the country and be the toast of the whole country, since she was very beautiful, young, and well educated. Her father's career would be secured, as Rahim could get any post in government for him. He could become a federal commissioner if his heart desired, or an ambassador to any country of his choosing. Her sisters and their husbands could have any job they wanted in the country. The sky was the limit for her and her family, he assured her. Moji was taken aback by all these sudden developments. She told Adewale she did not want to be a fourth wife to anyone, and besides, she loved him and did not want to give him up to marry someone else. She started to cry. Adewale did not believe that she loved him. He knew that he did not love her. His relationship with her had been based on all the benefits it could get him on having the right wife, and he believed that she wanted him because he was a colonel in the army, for his popularity and for his bright future. he continued to appeal to her. He told her that they could continue their relationship in secret, but that they both stood to gain a lot if she married Rahim, and that she should look at it as a business arrangement. Moji asked for a week to think about the deal, and Adewale knew right away that she would do it. When he returned the following weekend, Moji told him that she would marry Rahim, but under the condition that Adewale fathered all her children. She did not want to have any children by the ugly man because she wanted her children to be beautiful. Adewale realized that he had underestimated her shrewdness, and developing a higher level of respect for her, agreed to her terms. He told himself that he would think of a way to get out of fathering her children. He also realized that Moji's request that he fathered her children was not about Rahim's ugliness, because he was not ugly. He had seen some of his children, and all of whom were quite good looking. He knew that the request was so that Moji would have some hold on him for the future, and there would be a bond between them. He mentally tipped his hat to her. He wondered aloud about her father's reaction, but told him not to worry about her, that she would take care of him. What they needed to do was for Adewale to get her pregnant first. When she had missed her first period, she would start a relationship with Rahim. After 5 weeks into the relationship with him, she would announce her pregnancy and tell her father that Rahim got her pregnant and she wanted to marry him. Of course, her father would have a big problem with that, but she would persuade Rahim to get him Senior Advocate of the Nation's recognition. That was an honor her father wanted more than anything in the world. It would ease his disappointment, and he would consent to the marriage. Adewale did not want to father her children. He had been very careful of all his life not to father any woman's children. He did not want to be in bondage to her at all. He wanted to make a clean break and let it be over. But Moji made it crystal clear that his fathering her children was the only condition by which she would agree to marry Rahim. Adewale, not knowing what else to do to convince her and wanting very much to have Rahim become indebted to him, agreed to her terms, and they set out about the task of getting her pregnant. She abandoned the rest of her year in law school and moved to Ibadan with him. A month later, as Moji anticipated, she became pregnant. Adewale took her to Lagos and to Rahim's office. The older man was very pleased and excited when the two of them walked into his office, that he became like a bumbling schoolboy in the presence of the beautiful Moji. Adewale left her there and returned to his job with the $500 million contract secured in his hands. He invited several construction companies to bid on the contract, and he finally settled with a company owned by the younger brother of another general in the army. He did not make any money on the contract because he did not want anything attached to his name. When he was offered about $1 million as thanks for the contract, he refused the money. But he told the contractor that all he wanted from him was for his brother to look out for him in the army. The contractor promised him his brother's undying support. As expected by both Moji and Adewale, the judge had a fit when his daughter informed him that she was pregnant by Rahim, who by then had shipped all his wives and children back to his village near Zuru, or to the United States, where some of the children were in school, and installed Moji as the only woman with him in Lagos. The judge ranted and raved and threatened to do Rahim physical harm. Rahim, knowing that he could not be touched, humored him in his anger. He calmly told him that the president had decided to recognize his achievement in law for the country by making him a senior advocate of the nation, and that he could have the post of the nation's ambassador to Japan. 2 weeks later, Moji married Rahim in an impressively large ceremony. As Adewale had promised, the whole social circle of the country fell in love with Moji. Her pictures were in the newspapers almost on a daily basis. Every woman in the country wanted to adopt her fashion. She was seen with the first lady all the time, and the whole country closely watched her as the pregnancy grew. When she developed morning sickness, the country vomited with her. She was everyone's darling and was invited to every party, and she in turn enjoyed all the attention and glamour that marrying the powerful army general brought her. When asked how he felt to have lost his beautiful girlfriend to the most powerful and richer general, Adewale raked up a lot of sympathy by acting the role of the abandoned boyfriend. 9 months later, when Moji gave birth to a baby girl, Rahim was so pleased about this that he invited Adewale back to his office and gave him another contract as thanks for making it possible for him to marry Moji, who not only graced him with her beauty and poise, but just gave birth to his first daughter, who was as beautiful as her mother. The contract was to build 100 elementary schools in the northern region because the military government just decreed that all children of school age must be enrolled in schools, and so the need to build the schools. The contract was for $500 million. Adewale thanked him for the contract and assured the older man that he felt privileged to have given him Moji, that it made him very happy, that Moji had given him a lot of pleasure, and if in the future Rahim needed him for any services within his power to perform, he would be honored to be of more service. He had the urge to see the newborn inasmuch as she was his daughter, but he felt that it was better if he stayed away from Moji so that Rahim would not think that he still had an interest in her. But Rahim, feeling very generous since the birth of the baby girl, invited him to the naming ceremony that was a few days away. Adewale attended the ceremony, saw the baby girl, and confirmed to himself that she was as beautiful as her mother. He did experience some paternal feelings, but he had to squelch them. Moji, however, needed to speak with him. She was not happy that she had to convert to Islamic religion as Rahim had ordered her, and the ceremony to do that followed the naming ceremony. Her daughter was given the name Amina. She was not happy about that either. She wanted her baby to have a Yoruba name and not a Muslim name. And besides, it was Rahim's first wife's name. Why is he naming my child after her? She demanded of Adewale, who did not have an answer for her. Rahim had instructed her to pick a Muslim name for herself, and she refused, so he picked a name for her. Everybody in his family now calls me Fatima, she wept. Also, Rahim's other wives arrived from Zuru after she returned from England, where she had the baby. And when she protested to him about this, Rahim explained to her that they had come to care for her and the baby. It is Hausa tradition, he had said, and that they would stay with her until the baby was at least 1 year old. The most senior wife, Iya, who did not speak a word of Yoruba or English, made all the decisions about the care of the baby, and the baby was with the woman all the time. I get to hold my baby only when I breastfeed her. I don't have a say in what I want for her, as I don't speak Hausa, so it is a big language barrier. The moment I am done feeding the baby, they whisk her away from me and they tell me that I need to rest. They all crowd around the baby, passing her from one to the other and speaking to her in Hausa. She wanted out of the marriage, she sobbed, and it was not as she anticipated. She and Adewale had a quick conference in which he tried as much as he could to calm her. Hush, Moji, he consoled her. Hush, you're going to be fine. Moji wept throughout the ceremony. All the women present, which included her mother, sisters, and wives of other prominent people in the country, reassured her that she would feel better with time. They told her that it was baby blues and that it happened to almost everybody. Adewale was a little worried that she might break down completely and tell Rahim that the baby was not his, but he reassured himself that she was smart and would not do that. However, he called her on the phone every day after the ceremony to continue to speak with her to calm down and make the best of the situation. The phone conversations with him seemed to help her, because 1 month later, when he saw her at the launching ceremony, she was as radiant as ever. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 3A. The next time I continue reading, it will be chapter 3B. We'll continue from page 60. Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard or anything on my channel, I would invite you to subscribe, share with your friends and family, leave a comment, let me know what you like or what needs to be improved. Let me hear some feedback from you. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you would like to buy my cousin's book, Our Mother's Sore Expectations, kindly email her at her first name Kende, her last name Ayeni, the number 26 at gmail.com. Kende Ayeni at Kende Ayeni 26 at gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.